A cacophony of twisted metal, screaming sirens, and the primal fear of a nation under siege. On September 11, 2001, the unthinkable tears through the clear blue sky above New York City. Flight 11, then Flight 175, rip into the heart of the World Trade Center, transforming icons of American ambition into infernos of ash and despair. Over 2,900 lives vanish in an instant, a wound inflicted directly upon the soul of a people who believed themselves untouchable. The dust settles, but the terror lingers, a choking shroud over Ground Zero. Rescuers, covered in a ghostly white film, claw through the pulverized remains of steel and concrete, desperate for any sign of life. A single firefighter, soot-stained and weary, stares into the void where towers once stood, the profound grief etched onto his face reflecting a nation's collective sorrow. America feels a seismic shift, a rupture in the very fabric of its existence. From the rubble of the Pentagon, from the fields of Shanksville, Pennsylvania, a defiant roar rises. President George W. Bush stands amidst the ruins, megaphone in hand, his voice trembling with resolve, but his words clear: "I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon." A nation, united in grief and fury, demands retribution. The investigation is swift, cutting through the fog of war. The perpetrators, Al-Qaeda, a shadowy extremist organization led by a Saudi dissident named Osama bin Laden. Their network of terror, global in reach, finds sanctuary in the rugged mountains and remote villages of Afghanistan, a nation already scarred by decades of conflict. The name Al-Qaeda is seared into the world's consciousness, a symbol of a new kind of enemy. Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires, is a land of stark beauty and brutal history. For centuries, invaders have come, and nearly all have left defeated. Its arid plains, towering Hindu Kush mountains, and fiercely independent tribal communities make it a crucible where foreign ambitions often melt away. Now, this ancient land, already ravaged by the Soviet-Afghan War and civil strife, prepares to face another foreign power. From the White House, President Bush delivers an uncompromising ultimatum to the Taliban regime, which controls much of Afghanistan: deliver to the United States authorities all of the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Close every terrorist training camp. Hand over every terrorist and every person and their supporters involved in these atrocities. The stakes could not be higher. But the Taliban, fundamentalist and defiant, refuses. Mullah Omar, their reclusive leader, dismisses the demands, citing religious duties and tribal codes of hospitality. They believe America will not dare to tread where empires before have faltered. Their defiance is an open challenge, a declaration that Afghanistan will not bend to foreign will, no matter the cost. Across the globe, an unparalleled military machine begins to stir. Aircraft carriers steam towards the Arabian Sea, special operations forces prepare for deployment, and intelligence agencies work feverishly. The world holds its breath, witnessing the relentless momentum of a superpower preparing for war, its anger palpable, its purpose clear: vengeance. The stage is set for a conflict unlike any other. With no other recourse, President Bush makes the solemn vow. Operation Enduring Freedom is authorized. America will deploy its might, not just to punish, but to dismantle Al-Qaeda's sanctuary, to bring its leaders to justice. A new kind of war, against a stateless enemy, is about to begin in a land that has consumed countless armies. This is not merely a war, it is a promise of profound and lasting change. The sky over Afghanistan rips open on October 7, 2001. Cruise missiles streak, B-52 bombers unleash their payloads, transforming the rugged landscape into an inferno of fire and dust. America's might descends with terrifying precision, targeting Al-Qaeda training camps and Taliban command centers, a furious response to the unholy scars of 9/11. The world watches, mesmerized, as the ground shakes and the initial shockwave of retribution ripples across the globe. On the ground, the Northern Alliance, a mosaic of anti-Taliban factions, senses the shift. Emboldened by American air power, General Abdul Rashid Dostum's fighters, mounted on pickup trucks and horseback, surge forward. They reclaim strategic positions, pushing south with a ferocity long dormant. City after city falls in rapid succession, a whirlwind of retreat and advance that seems to herald an unprecedented collapse of Taliban authority. Just over a month after the first bombs fell, on November 13, 2001, the capital city of Kabul awakens to an unfamiliar silence. The Taliban have vanished into the night, abandoning their oppressive rule. Jubilant crowds spill into the streets, men shaving beards, women shedding burqas, music once forbidden now blaring from speakers. A fleeting vision of liberation sweeps across the land, the world hails it as a stunning, improbable victory, seemingly snatched from the jaws of despair. But the architect of the attacks, Osama bin Laden, remains elusive. Intelligence points to the formidable mountain labyrinth of Tora Bara in December 2001, a natural fortress riddled with caves and tunnels near the Pakistan border. Elite U.S. Special Forces and CIA operatives, alongside Afghan allies, converge, believing they have cornered their prey. The air crackles with anticipation, the weight of a nation's vengeance hanging heavy in the thin mountain air. For weeks, the brutal fight rages in the freezing heights, a desperate hunt through ancient cave complexes. Bombs hammer the peaks, Afghan fighters press forward, but a critical miscalculation is made, a failure to fully seal the escape routes. Under the cloak of night, as a brutal blizzard descends, Osama bin Laden, the man most wanted by the world, slips away across the border into Pakistan, disappearing like a ghost into the unforgiving landscape. The prize, so tantalizingly close, is lost. With bin Laden gone, and the Taliban seemingly routed, a new, more ambitious vision begins to take hold in Washington. President George W. Bush's focus shifts, declaring an axis of evil and turning his gaze towards Iraq, its leader Saddam Hussein, and the specter of weapons of mass destruction. The momentum of Operation Enduring Freedom begins to wane, Afghanistan, though not forgotten, now relegated to a secondary theater. In Afghanistan, the mission morphs. From destroying a sanctuary, it expands to building a nation. Billions flow into roads, schools, clinics, and a new democratic government. American soldiers, once warriors, now become engineers, teachers, and peacekeepers, striving to win hearts and minds in a land ravaged by decades of conflict. The air is thick with optimistic pronouncements of progress, of a new dawn for Afghanistan. But beneath the surface of this new prosperity, in the vast, neglected rural areas, a familiar shadow lengthens. The Taliban, once scattered, begin to regroup, exploiting resentment against foreign presence and the perceived corruption of the nascent government. They sow discord, plant crude IEDs along dusty roads, and launch sporadic, deadly attacks. The victory begins to feel less like an end and more like an intermission. The nature of the war is shifting again, insidiously, relentlessly. It is no longer about overwhelming conventional force or decisive battles. It becomes a grind, a war of attrition, of hidden enemies, of elusive goals. The mirage of a swift, complete victory shimmers and dissipates, revealing instead the harsh, intractable reality of America's longest war, a conflict with no clear enemy lines, no easily defined end, and a cost that would grow beyond imagination. A searing blast rips through the dry desert air, instantly replacing the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel with the piercing scream of shrapnel. One moment, a patrol from the 101st Airborne moves through the Kandahar countryside, the next, an improvised explosive device, buried unseen, transforms the earth into a weapon. This is the new battlefield, an invisible enemy sowing terror with every step, and with every detonation, the grinding war reveals its brutal face. The body heals, sometimes. But the mind carries deeper scars, etched by the endless hunt, the sudden violence, the comrades lost. Thousands of American service members endure multiple deployments, cycling through years of relentless combat, a generation returning home with the invisible wounds of PTSD and traumatic brain injury. The enemy is unseen, but the toll is brutally real, haunting their waking hours and their dreams. Amidst the bombs and bullets, another war wages, a battle for hearts and minds, for a future Afghanistan. American engineers construct schools and wells, advisors train a new Afghan national army, a nascent government struggles to find its footing in Kabul. But entrenched corruption, tribal loyalties, and a deep distrust of foreign influence erode every hopeful step, making the ground beneath them constantly shift. President Barack Obama, inheriting a protracted conflict, escalates the commitment, ordering a surge of 30,000 additional troops in 2009. General Stanley McChrystal leads the new counterinsurgency strategy, aiming to protect the population and win their trust. It is a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide against an insurgency that seems only to grow stronger with each passing year. Yet, the elusive enemy persists, melting back into the mountains and across the porous border into Pakistan, where safe havens allow them to regroup and replenish. The surge delivers tactical victories, pushes back the Taliban in some areas, but cannot fully dislodge them. The fundamental challenge remains: how do you defeat an ideology, a shadow network, when it seems to breathe the very air of the land? Back home, a decade into the war, public opinion sours. The promise of swift victory fades, replaced by a weary resignation to what many now call the forever war. Voices on both sides of the political spectrum demand an exit, questioning the enormous cost in lives and treasure for an objective that seems ever more distant, ever more undefined. The pressure to leave becomes immense. Then, a pivot. In February 2020, under the Trump administration, the U.S. signs a withdrawal agreement with the Taliban in Doha, Qatar. It sets a timetable for the complete departure of American forces, contingent on Taliban commitments to prevent terrorist groups from operating in Afghanistan. A new chapter begins, not of victory, but of disengagement, fraught with immense uncertainty and the weight of history. As the final American troops depart in August 2021, the Afghan government and its U.S.-trained army collapse with terrifying speed. City after city falls to the resurgent Taliban, culminating in the frantic, chaotic evacuation from Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport. Thousands desperately flood the runways, clinging to departing planes, a visceral, agonizing image of a nation unraveling, abandoning hope. The dust settles over Kabul, but the questions linger, heavy and unresolved. The Taliban reasserts its brutal rule, reversing 2 decades of progress, especially for women and girls. Over 2,400 American lives, tens of thousands of Afghan lives, and trillions of dollars, what was it all for? The forever war ends, leaving behind a scarred land, a devastated people, and a profound, unfinished legacy that demands reckoning.